Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. There are exceptions to the one-year filing deadline, which is a requirement to be eligible for asylum. And I want everyone to know about the exceptions, and also I want everyone to be able to share this information with friends and family. I covered the one-year filing rule about 6 months ago, but I had 2 consultations last week that reminded me about how important it is for people to be aware of the one-year filing rule, as well as exceptions to the one-year filing rule. And so that's what I want to talk about in a little more detail. 2 people had not filed for asylum in a couple of years because of bad advice that they received from asylum attorneys. And in my opinion, each person had very good reasons for not filing 1 year within entering the US and very clearly met an exception and should have been advised to apply much sooner. So while I can't cover all of the exceptions to the one-year filing rule, I do want to go over just a couple of more common situations so that if you have not filed for asylum, but you're afraid to return, then you can think, maybe some of these apply to me. Or if you have friends or family members who have not yet applied for asylum, however, they fear returning, and it's been more than a year, you can also say to them, hey, reach out to an attorney, get advice. You may still be able to file even though you're past the 1 year. Even if you're way past the 1 year mark, you may still be able to apply. So there's 2 major categories to think about to sort of put it in a clear explanation. Is one, think about changes in a person's status or their personal circumstances in the US. And you can also think about changes that are happening in the person's home country. So first, let's talk about country condition changes. We represent a lot of clients from Ethiopia, for example, and there are major changes right now over the last 6 months that have been happening. And changes in the government, changes in how the government is treating certain groups of people, changes in how certain groups of people are being targeted by others, these may all give rise to an exception to the 1 year filing deadline or an explanation as to why you are just now applying, even though you've been in the US for a very long time. So even if the situation back home, like you were afraid to return home 5 years ago, but now the situation has really escalated and the conditions have worsened and you are even more afraid to return home, there may still be some explanation for your late application and legal explanations as to how you would still be eligible for asylum. So always keep in mind changed country conditions. Something may have changed back home that has changed the person's fear of return, and so that may meet an exception to the 1 year filing rule. Another type of change to think about is the person's change in status here in the US. That may apply to their immigration status. It may apply to their marital status. It may apply to their religious beliefs. There's a lot of things that may change that then put the person in danger upon return. Or there are things that may change that may impact why the person has not yet applied for asylum. So, for example, if someone is in valid immigration status, then they don't have to apply for asylum within 1 year of entering the US. Maybe you came on a student visa 4 years ago. Maybe your friend came on a H visa 6 years ago, but now they're considering filing for asylum. They are not subject to the 1 year filing rule. Instead, they have to show that they've filed within a reasonable time after losing that status, after their status changes. So even while they're in status and it's been 10 years, they can still apply today. Another status situation to think about is Maybe the person was in application process for another type of status. Maybe they had an adjustment of status application pending, and for all intents and purposes, that application was going to go through and it should be fine, but then something has happened and it's been denied for some reason, or withdrawn by a spouse or withdrawn by an employer. The person's situation has changed. So once again, this is arguably an exception to the 1-year filing deadline. Similarly, if someone has been included as a dependent on another pending asylum application, they most likely meet, and I've argued successfully, that they meet an exception to the 1-year filing rule. Some people who have been included as a dependent are specifically written into the law to be excluded from the 1-year filing requirement. And that is when someone loses their derivative status. So maybe the primary applicant and the derivative get divorced, or maybe the primary applicant passes away, and that initial status relationship to the primary applicant has ended. So that's one example. But also maybe one of the maybe the derivative applicant just decides, you know what, I really want to have my own application in my own name, and so I'm going to apply for asylum now. And if that person was already a derivative on a pending application, then they should be protected by the exceptions to the 1-year filing rule. And also, maybe someone gets married to someone outside of their religion, and that's going to cause them serious harm upon return or threats. Maybe they get married to someone of the same gender, and then that's going to put them in danger. Even if they've been here 10 years, those changes may impact their fear of return and therefore make them eligible and meet an exception to the 1-year filing deadline. Similarly, maybe someone changes their religion, and that may change their fear of return and change what may happen to them if they go back. There's multiple different situations that could qualify someone for an exception to the 1-year deadline. Again, I mentioned earlier, I can't cover them all, but some others to think about: perhaps the person has had a serious illness, maybe they've had mental trauma, physical trauma, disability. There's lots of different things. Maybe their age, maybe they received incorrect advice from the beginning from an attorney, and therefore that may qualify them for an exception to the 1-year filing deadline. So there's a lot of things to think about, and I just want this to be a little bit of information that people can take and know. Just because someone hasn't applied for asylum within 1 year, they're absolutely ineligible, because that's not true. An exception may not apply in your situation or your friend's situation, but it's likely that, they should definitely get advice to see if there is any way to argue an exception, and it's possible that maybe the 1-year filing rule is not a problem for them. However, it is important to file within a reasonable time period if you've missed the 1-year filing deadline based on changed circumstances. So if country conditions have changed, then you really need to try to apply, most likely within 6 months of a major shift in details, or once you realize, like, oh, I really am in serious danger. You need to start looking into filing, making sure that you file within a reasonable time. So you can't just go on forever and say, oh, well, I need an exception to the 1-year filing deadline, so I can apply at any time. That's not necessarily how this works. It is still important to file at a reasonable time, be able to explain the delay. However, it may be very possible to overcome that issue. This is, of course, very general advice. This is not meant to be legal advice. And if you have a situation that you think may apply, if you have questions, then you should certainly have a personal consultation with an experienced immigration attorney so that you can see if you may be eligible, or if it's smart for you to apply, or if you may be putting yourself in more danger. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop those in the comments. Remember that this is a public forum, so if you have very specific questions, just be careful, make sure that it's okay that people in the public will see it. We have a few comments. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. You're very welcome. We enjoy bringing this information to our clients, to our viewers, because we do think it's very important to make sure that people are as knowledgeable as they can be about their options. We don't want you to try to do this on your own. It is important to have well-trained legal counsel to take you through these processes. But it's also important for you to be aware of what's possible. I'm going to wrap up tonight. If anyone has specific questions, if you would like a consultation to discuss whether you may apply for asylum and get around the 1-year filing deadline, please feel free to email us. You can reach us at info@alightlegal.com. You can call us at 202-888-7821, and we would be happy to take a look at your situation and your case and see if you may qualify. All right, thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great evening. Bye.